Okay, so is it stressful that the day went long and the natural light is gone and now I am using my hipster fairy light aesthetic to try to be visible? Yes, that is stressful and was unexpected. But are we gonna make lemons out of lemonade by using this as an excuse to light a candle? Wow. Did you know you was getting a light show today? Oh, that's kind of fun. Okay, I'm on board now. Hello there, my parasocial pals, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chloe Payne, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Today, let us first just address a couple of the self-esteem crises, neuroses, stress points burbling at the forefront of my brain. Topic number one, I feel very self-conscious about my appearance. I need a haircut, and I'm not gonna have time to cut my hair until this weekend. My life is so hard and no one understands my pain. Now I'm self-conscious that it's really extra distracting to have the candle back there, because then when I gesticulate wildly, which I can't help but do, I make like an unintentional like little strobe effect every time. Chloe, it's organic, it's rustic, it's fine. And you know, I'm talking through all the imposter syndrome bullshit of having a little baby YouTube channel that I want to start trying to invest a little bit more creative effort and energy and time into. And I'm gonna do my best to just push through those self-doubts. I love to watch videos of people going through various like existential crises, or basically having talk therapy sessions at their camera, just chilling in their home, in their room, in their space, and just, you know, sharing the thoughts off the top of their head about what they're going through. I love to watch shit like that. That is the kind of shit that makes me feel a little less alone. I love the YouTube videos that just kind of feel like it's just a message in a bottle. It's just something to put out there for who knows whether anyone will ever see it. If anyone ever does see it and it resonates with them in some way, and there's a little bit of a connection over, oh, somebody else had a thought similar to my basket case thought. How fun. I'm not alone in this wide mixed up world. Then I love to watch that kind of shit. So I'm just going to do my best to push through the frustration and the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome bullshit. That was a lot to say. We're not even into the subject of the video yet. Oh, what is my hair doing? Who am I? Why must I be perceived? Why must I have a body that has to be seen by other people? Oh, also, I made notes and I'm looking off of my phone, and I know that you won't judge me for that because you are good and wise. We're just gonna sit in our comfy green chair and we're just going to trust the process and be grateful for the opportunity to make something, and something is better than nothing. Let's take a moment and just, oh, fuck. Let's just stretch it out. Let's shake it out. Let's take a deep breath. Oh, my word. So, getting older, being too old for things, having pressures and expectations and anxieties associated with one's youth, when one feels like one is young, when one feels like one's youth is gone, feelings around getting older. This general topic has been buzzing around in my head for a long time, and it's really starting to like crystallize into something more concrete, honestly, just in the last like few months. It's just today that I was able to see a video that was uploaded this weekend by Shanspeare. I am in my 30s reflecting on my experience of like my childhood, teenagehood, 20s, and Shanspeare just uploaded this incredibly just eloquent, beautiful, artistic, concise, much more concise than this video, piece about their experience being in their 20s and reflecting on the specific experience of like teenagehood and the manufactured nature of teenagehood and the unique way that only Shanspeare has of tying this topic as so many other topics, back to the ultimate evil. What does it? Say it with me. Capitalism. So that video, in addition to just being moving and entertaining and educational and just a real excellent like food for thought piece, it also just like felt like really serendipitous timing. This topic of like age and getting older and the benefits of it, as opposed to what for me were a lot of negative aspects of youth. Sometimes in the past, when I've reflected on these thoughts, I've been able to get into a self-deprecating space of isolating and convincing myself that surely I'm the only basket case who has ever experienced thoughts like that. Shanspeare's video at this particular time just felt like a real helpful and encouraging nudge from the universe that like, not only am I in general at any given time not the only person who thinks about this shit, but here is an example of another creator on this very platform whose work I admire, who has very eloquently spoken on this topic. Kudos to Shanspeare. What a brilliant fucking artist. And of course, I'll link their video below. I highly recommend that you go and check it out. So just some of my like basic demographic information, just in case you need to make like, you know, an informed decision for yourself about like where my perspective comes from and whether or not you give a shit about it. Perhaps you decided long ago that you are not interested in the opinion of like, you know, an aging millennial Tumblr queer. I am 36 years old. I am white. My socioeconomic class has basically always been middle class, like sometimes lower middle class-ish. I am trans, specifically I am non-binary and my pronouns are they, them. My girlfriend and I live in the state of Oregon. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest as an obnoxious drama club kid, and then I went off to college in Chicago to go to college, and I stayed out there for several years pursuing dreams of having a theater career, being an actor in theater specifically. I can recognize that a lot of the anxieties that I felt for a long time, for a lot of different reasons, like, you know, I was closeted, I was repressed, I was like going through some other shit, but also just like fucking youth is like a big, weird, hard, heavy idea that is full of pressure and that is full of expectation and that has a real like ticking time bomb associated with it. It's a real feeling of like opportunity running down the drain. It's a real feeling of these are supposed to be the best years of your life. And I, for a long time, thought that a lot of my own experience of like, you know, having been a depressed, anxious person for so long in like my teens and my 20s, I thought that a lot of that had to do with just like my own unique, you know, I'm so uniquely individually fucked up, and I'm sure no one has this experience of their youth. I'm sure everyone else around me is having a great time being a teenager, being in their 20s, being in college. As time goes on, there's more and more that I talk to other people about. I see other people reflect on in social media and pop culture, and, you know, things like Shanspeare's video that seem to make it really clear that like a lot of us have this shared idea of like youth being a time of, or a concept of, stress and anxiety and pressure and expectation. It seems like there's such a shared experience of like so many of us seeing, or like looking back on rather, the feeling of timelines, the feeling of there are certain milestones that need to be hit at certain times. If certain accomplishments are not made by certain set ideas of when they should be made, then you're just domino effect ruining the whole rest of your life. You know, if you don't finish the grad school by a certain time, if you don't reach whatever position at the job at a certain time, of course, like personal pressures and relationships, how this relates to like the people who feel like if they don't land a certain type of partner by a certain age, then they will have missed their window to be like a certain type of beautiful, blushing young bride that they always imagined they would be. Having expectations and putting all the anxiety on yourself about meeting those expectations. If those expectations are going to be met, it's going to be because you do it. And if those expectations aren't met, it's because you did something wrong. Greetings, it is Editing Chloe from the future. I will be jumping in occasionally to clarify something that passed Chloe.
forgot to articulate. One thing that was on my mind about this point on like expectations and like when we're so young, the expectations that we put on ourselves, just the way that it's all individually on our shoulders, and how that is such a tie-in to like the individualistic nature of capitalism and being an American, that like it's all on you. There's certainly never any reasonable extenuating circumstance that could get in the way of like your productive youth, of getting everything done that you want to get done in your teens or your 20s. Fuck financial hardships or, you know, economic recessions, devastations, difficulty paying one's bills, medical things that may be going on, personal issues. There's so much about like what youth is treated like in this day and age in particular, that has so much to do with like your individual achievement. It's all supposed to be on your shoulders, and if you can't get everything done on the timeline that you want to get it done, it's not because there's anything wrong with the structural society. It's not because capitalism is trying to bleed you dry and leave you a husk of a person who never actualized any of your goals. It's because you individually fucked up and you're a loser and you should feel bad about yourself.
And every time an expectation or a milestone, a timeline is not accomplished, then the stakes feel so high when you're young. It feels like, well, because this happened, now this won't be able to happen a year from now, and that thing won't be able to happen 5 years from now. So basically, I've ruined the whole rest of my life. At like 19, at like 22, people are thinking these things. I thought those kinds of things for ages. The like universality of age-related pressure. The idea of like your accomplishments needing to be laid out on a linear, pre-plannable, anticipatable timeline. And all of that is just the young adult shit, like kind of like, you know, 20s and early 30s-ish. That's to say nothing of what a goddamn hellscape it is to be a teenager, going through so many just like physical and chemistry and like the mapping out of the synapses in your changing brain all the time. So there's so much happening physically, hormonally, chemically, and you're also supposed to be performing academically and, you know, sometimes maybe like holding down a job or like contributing to your family's finances. And you have to start then, even as like you're still a kid, and you have to start mapping out and setting those ideas for what your goals of your future are going to look like. And then you take that all back even further, and like to be a kid, to be like, you know, a junior high, middle school, elementary school, like, you know, young kid, like a preteen, is just powerlessness. And during all those phases of your life, you're also getting the message from society, from pop culture, maybe from other older people in your life who look down at you and tell you that these are supposed to be the best years of your life. Even from the time that you're a kid, and then especially heading into like your teen years and your young adulthood, you're already so acutely aware of this like pressure. The idea that like you're supposed to be treasuring this youth. The idea that these are supposed to be the times that you'll look back on. The expectation that is put on you, like separate and apart from like whatever individual neuroses one may have going on, and like, you know, the traps that we keep ourselves caged in our own brains and the expectations we bring on ourselves. The messaging that is given to young people externally about you're supposed to be having the most fun of your whole life right now. You're supposed to be making the most long-lasting connections and relationships of your life right now. These are supposed to be the best memories of your life. So if you're not living some sort of idyllic, full of wonderful memories, full of once-in-a-lifetime experiences, full of things that you think older you will look back on one day and be like, man, I sure did live the hell out of my teen years, out of my 20s, then suffice it to say, my primary experience of like youth and teenagehood, young adulthood, in many ways childhood, was an experience of anxiety, of pressure, of feeling time run down the drain.
And one thing I forgot to mention, we're about to jump in next to talking about like being older and getting older, and how for me that was a period very much about like letting go of a lot of the stresses associated with youth. And one thing that I forgot to mention here in sort of the youth chapter before we move on is that for me, a lot of the high stakes and the language around expectations are really high when you're young. You're supposed to get a lot done and you're supposed to do it all yourself, and you're supposed to be having the best time of your life. A lot of those pressures translated for me into like social norms being very important to adhere to. The need to try to fit in, popularity, being cool, being perceived as attractive, doing things correctly, following trends, trying to be like relevant and plugged into some group and cluster and clique at all times, you know, on the like high school and collegiate level, and like to have like a trendy, cool, hip, relevant group of friends at all times that made me feel like I was plugged in. A lot of the expectations and high stakesedness of youth made me feel like the highest social currency I could gain would be gained by thinking a lot about what other people thought about me, paying very close attention to like trends, trying to be hip, trying to be cool, and the necessity to do things correctly, the necessity to never make mistakes, the necessity to avoid ever being bad at anything. Because if you try something and you're not good at it, then you are being a fool in front of others. It is important to always do things that you are good at and do them correctly, and have everything that you do be contributing to the ultimate success of your long-term plans and goals, and having friends and YOLOing and having the very best time of your whole life ever. The idea is going to come up again later in the video of like that for me, a lot of the practical application in my youth of like those broad fears around like expectation, the stakes are very high and it's all on my shoulders. A lot of that in practice got translated into the language of like, oh, okay, so I need everybody to like me, and I need to be as cool as I can and as attractive as I can and as relevant as I can. I need to try to have social success and like be as hip and relevant as possible. Spoiler alert, that was stressful and I did not like it.
So now, let's talk about getting older, baby! Let's talk about aging out of relevancy. Let's talk about living past the best years. Holy shit. As I got older, like into my late 20s, early 30s, I did legitimately start to see some opportunities, some good things slip away. My metabolism changed, like my body changed. The gray hairs started coming in. You can't quite see it in this light, but I actually have a very dapper array of salt and peppers coming in on the sides. Very proud of my seasoning. That's disgusting. There was definitely a distinct point too, probably around when I started having like younger cousins, and then definitely when I started having like actually like nieces and nephews and like whole generations below me. There's a sense that I had that like my cultural relevancy was really shifting. I was no longer the youngest generation. I was no longer even the youngest young adult generation. I was no longer a part of the generation that was hip, happening, setting trends. That was no longer me. And at first, that sensation in particular was a real sense of loss and a real sense of panic and fear a little bit. I am happy to be able to report at my wizened old veteran age of 36 that for me, getting older and specifically becoming like more irrelevant, becoming less cool, it is the most freeing, exhilarating, just relief. It is a relief. It is In the first part of my life, I might not have been able to articulate in like my teens or my 20s that a big part of what I was feeling in terms of my just like general overall mental malaise was specifically a sense of anxiety about my age and about my youth. I don't know if I would have been able to put my finger on it in that way, but as soon as I started crossing over, like everybody I think has like different mile point, mile marker, ages that they feel like that's a really different time of your life. And for whatever reason, for me, there was definitely just a thing of like turning 30 felt particularly like cool and freeing because like, oh my God, I'm leaving behind my fucking 20s. Fuck that decade. That was a decade of trial and error and pain and of learning by falling flat on my face. Fuck anybody who thinks that the 20s are your best years of your life, I said to myself. That wasn't the case for me, and I was thrilled to leave them behind. And then it wasn't particular, and so turning 30 felt very invigorating, very empowering, but it was definitely a distinct thing of like being in my early 30s that felt like, oh man, I'm now like closer to 35 than I am to 30. Oh, weird. I'm not like the younger end of 30. I'm not like, I can hang out with, older friends and they see me as the kid. I hang out with older friends and they see me as the peer. My 40-year-old coworker sees me as a peer. Oh, weird. Like there was definitely something specifically about being in my early 30s and that language and the idea that I had in my head of what a person in their early 30s is that for me meant a real like cultural switch, meant a real like, oh, I am no longer cool. Oh, I am no longer part of like the cool, hip, happening population. There are people using entirely different social media things that I will never even bother to pick up. I still don't know how Snapchat works, and I don't ever want to know. I refuse to learn. Like, the youth is one population, and I am separate from that. That was a very much a part of the early 30s experience for me. And it wasn't until that happened that I was able to start to have a little bit of distance, a little bit of objectivity from what had felt like my youth, and start to be able to see, oh my God, that shit was stressing me out. It is absolutely true that at first it was an experience of sort of loss and despair. The sort of mindset was like, oh, now I'm irrelevant. Oh, now I am all washed up. Now I have nothing left to offer anyone. How can I possibly start anything new? How can I possibly have any goals? What use am I to anyone or myself? But very quickly, very organically, that mind shift, started to transform from, oh, my youth is behind me to, oh, well, now what's in front of me? What's in front of me is something different from this idea of youth that has always been behind me. And that was shitty and stressful. So maybe what will be in front of me will be something better than that. It started to very distinctly in my mind take on the shift in tone from, oh no, I'm no longer relevant, to, oh my God, I'm no longer relevant. I don't have to worry about what trends are. I don't have to keep up with what is hip or cool. I am inherently, I probably never was hip or cool, but now I am just de facto. Regardless of any efforts I might make to the contrary, I am not hip or cool. Wow! What a freedom, what a release from the shackles of trend and expectation and pressure of youth. It started to feel like a very invigorating thing. Something intrinsically related about the notion of youth and the anxiety and pressure and ticking time bomb of youth that for me feels really inherently tied to the trappings of popularity and the pressures and expectations of trend and relevancy and being perceived as cool, being perceived in any kind of way that you want to try to control, having a controlled and metered out and carefully measured version of yourself that you portray to others. For me, it's been a really exciting part of getting older that as you move away from youth and you're also then able to start to let go of that filter, that lens that you see everything through that kind of skews everything, and is always in the language of ticking clocks and running out of time and the youth and the beauty and the trend and the relevancy. When you move further away from that, there's just such freedom. Letting go of any of the like restrictions that like, you know, being scared of cringe or something might have on me. I get to just be irrelevant and cringy. And I love it. Yeah, I take great pride these days in understanding myself to be like earnest and nerdy and cringy, and I get to just lean into those aspects of myself. I no longer have to keep those aspects of myself hidden. It's just so apparent that like so much of my past was very defined by sometimes being like frozen into inaction because of like a fear of perfection or a craving for perfection or a feeling of just like the pressure that like you only have so much time, so you have to get everything right the first time. And it's nice to get old enough to realize that like there's always a million reasons to not do something, and there's always a million different ways in which you could fall flat on your face and look very uncool trying something. There are always a lot of different things that you could try to take a chance on that might end up being like, you know, the most flop decision you could ever make, the most irrelevant thing that no one is ever going to care about you having done. And it's so freeing to be able to make more choices just based out of like what I am genuinely interested in doing and less dictated by like what trends are telling me to do. A perfect example is, I mean, sitting here on this YouTube channel talking to you right now. I love YouTube. I've loved YouTube for a long time, and I have always had kind of an aspiration to want to do something more here, make different kinds of videos, make videos more often, connect with more people in different ways on this platform. I always was able to convince myself that the timing was never quite right. I've often felt in the past that perfectionism pressure, specifically having been like, you know, lucky in many ways to have been a kid who was fortunate enough to receive praise, receive encouragement, receive support for the things that I was good at. And as I've gotten older and talked to other people who are sort of now recovering from that like gifted kid syndrome, it feels like a lot of people can now sort of relate to the complex of being in your 20s, being a young adult, and experiencing terror about the idea of leaning into something that you're not initially good at. Like if you're trying to take on something new and you're not immediately very good at it naturally, then there's a tendency to want to back away from it. There's a tendency to be afraid of a challenge because you don't want to be bad at something. You get old enough to realize that there is no way to get better at something without being bad at it for a while, and that's where improvement comes from. That's where growth comes from. But it's very uncool to be bad at something, earnestly trying at something at which you may not succeed. You might look foolish in front of other people. And I am just so thrilled to now be fully ensconced in my being bad at stuff era. I can't wait to look back in the future at this period of time, at this video, at the videos like this, and feel like I did a terrible job and be proud of myself for having done it anyway, for having tried. And you know what? Future me will only be able to look back on this specific video or this period of time or whatever. Future me will only be able to look back on this period of time and say, oh man, Chloe of that year, Chloe of that video was doing so poorly. I'll only be able to look back and say that if at that time in the future when I'm looking back, if I've improved, if I've gotten better, if in the future I was too much of a coward and stopped making this effort and I'm no better at the things that I want to be good at years from now than I am today, then when I look back on these efforts, then I just get to feel like sad that I didn't keep trying, you know? I get to feel sad that I didn't keep how much further could I have gone if I had kept trying? And yes, that's the perfect segue into how I started sort of thinking about doing this video within this silly framework of the fucking meme. If youth equals fear and perfectionism pressure, and age equals no longer giving a shit and just trying things regardless of any expectation of perfection. It made me think of, there's some episode of the Trixie and Katya YouTube show where I think that it was that they were watching like old clips of themselves on Drag Race or something like that.
I am a winner who is formerly a big loser, Trixie Mattel.
Yeah, and I just... Katya.
And I think it was Katya said something to the effect of, if you're looking back at old footage of yourself and not at least a little bit embarrassed, then that means that you've done something wrong. You haven't grown.
But you know what? You can't be a creative without looking back on some choices you made that ultimately don't resound.
If you're not embarrassed about last year, you're not making any progress.
Absolutely.
And that just really inspired me for Katya to be able to put that in the framework specifically of thinking about yourself in different timelines and thinking about yourself specifically in the timeline of like, if you are currently, like right now, if you have the opportunity to look back at old pictures of yourself, maybe even like, you know, doing something that you think that you're good at now, and you look back and at, you know, what your first like typing efforts were, what your first writing efforts were, what your first efforts were like of like your personal fashion, you know, just like your sense of style and like how you dressed. You look back and you are able to feel some sense of, you know, earnestness and affection towards that younger past version of yourself who is doing their best. But there's likely also a little bit of a sense of like, ooh, gosh, they're doing their best, but that ain't it. That is a sensation that you only get to feel if you've made progress. If you feel like the you of today has made progress from the version of you in the past that you're looking back at. Give yourself permission to imagine yourself in like 1 or 5 or 10 years looking back on like, what do you wish you would try? What do you, if you could let go of some perfectionism pressure, if you could let go of some pressure of like trend and relevancy and like, you know, I'm too old for that or I'm not old enough for that. If there were a release from some of the labels and the expectations that we tie to ideas of youth and age, what would that free you up to do? What would future you looking back on this September 2022 version of you wish that you had tried at? I know how very, very pretentious I am. Oh, but anyway, Katya. So yeah, Katya had that observation on the web show that I thought was very astute. And it made me think of the Tumblr meme Adore saying party and Katya saying party. And, you know, one is affectionate and one is derogatory. If you're not familiar with the meme structure, it's just the basic notion that the same term, the same word, the same idea can mean 2 different things depending on the context in which you say it, if the context is affectionate or derogatory. And I just thought that that was a fun framing for this ramble that I've been mulling over for a while in terms of like, yeah, a call to action for myself and anyone else out there who may need the call to action. Let's move forward with this meme structure in mind. When we consider the terms that we might sometimes use to like beat ourselves up or tell ourselves a shitty narrative about ourselves, to tell ourselves like, I'm too old for XYZ thing. Do we want to say, I'm too old for that, as in like derogatory? Or do we want to say like, ooh, I am too old for that, affectionate? Is it, you know, derogatory, like not acting my age or not having hit the appropriate like milestones that I once my, you know, youth dictated for myself that I would accomplish X, Y, or Z thing by this point? Or is it the, I'm too old for that, as in like affectionate, you know, freed from expectations, empowered to let go of old pressures, basking in irrelevancy, uncool and loving it? Oh, I am too old for that. No, I will not stay out past 10 p.m. for your social event. I shall not. I am too old for that, and I am thrilled to say it. No, I will not learn how to use the Be Real app. I am too old for that, and I do not care, and I will not apologize. These ideas obviously are not anything new, anything revolutionary. I think that these ideas have only been coming into sharper and sharper focus for, you know, the youth of today who are living on a planet in the midst of a global pandemic and a climate crisis. But just in the interest of one of my guiding principles these days being very much about when in doubt, I want to have a North Star of mine be to just make the kinds of videos that I like to watch. And I take endless satisfaction in seeing how lots of different individual people approach topics that can be very universal. What I have to say about age and youth, getting older and being too old for shit is different from what you may have to say about it, from what Shanspeare may have to say about it, from what Katya may have to say about it. It's one of the things that most inspires me is that, like, you know, it doesn't matter if 1,000 other people before you have thought about this topic. Like, it's still worthwhile for you to take time to mull it over for yourself. And we all have something just even slightly different to bring to the same topic. And that's part of why it matters that we keep on discussing things with each other and making art about shit, because there's always something different and unique because you are unique. I get on such the philosophical soapboxes. I just like to watch other people philosophize on their philosophy soapboxes. I'm sorry. The YouTube.com made me do it. It's the fault of the YouTube. It inspired me. Oh, wait. I just remembered that I was going to share my little story time here at the end of this.
And what happened then was I realized how very long the video was getting. In this evening I had, when I was filming this, I was having a really good time. So I just kept the party going by sharing like a little story time of like a favorite. I think I'm about to be like really excited that I only have one eyebrow for a second. I'm removing my makeup. And there's a little moment of seeing myself in the camera and saying, oh wow, look at that, how weird to only have one eyebrow. Ain't cosmetics, wow, look, one eyebrow, what a life it is to live. Yeah, the part of this that I really only wanted to explain is that I'm going to be wearing slightly different clothes here for the outro, but moral of the story, there's some anecdote that I like to share about, man, age sure is crazy, right? In this acting gig in Chicago where I first started thinking about all this stuff years ago. Good times! And now to the outro.
I hope that you'll leave a comment below if you've watched this far, in the incredibly unlikely event that there's anyone watching right now, aside from just like, you know, my own current experience getting talk therapy benefit out of articulating these thoughts, and like my 3 friends and mom's cat. If they're someone other than those people and you are still watching, you must have something to say on this topic. You've been listening this far. I implore you, leave me some kind of comment below to let me know where your head is at on this topic. How old are you right now? What does it make you think of to reflect back on what your youth prior to this age has felt like? Do you still identify as someone who is like young or, you know, feels connected to the idea of youth? Or are you on the other side of what feels like youth or young people? And how does that make you feel? Does it bring you a sense of freedom and independence from shackles, or does it make you feel irrelevant, derogatory? I hope that you'll like this video, hit the subscribe button. We're trying to race towards our first 100 subscribers, and I upload new videos on this channel every Wednesday/Thursday. If you are interested in mediocre pictures on Instagram, or the misadventures of a cool 36-year-old cool kid on TikTok, or if you like gay memes and rambles on Tumblr, then I hope that you will come hang out with me at your social media location of choice. I am...
And then I mispronounced my own handle because I was too sleepy, at ChloeThePayne on all the things. please come be friends on social media.
If you're having a tough day and you need some mental health hugs, encouragements, phone numbers, that shit is down below. And if you have it in you to maybe consider some ways to make the world a little bit less shitty, register to vote, donate to some different funds, look at some different volunteer opportunities, anything that you might want to check out in terms of those resources will be down below for you, as well as all my other contact information if you ever need to hit me up for like commission songwriting or check out my website or anything like that. I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. I don't know whether or not I have figured out how to make an end card. So this might be where the end card goes. The candle is lavender, by the way.